All right, guys, so I didn't get to record the second one at soccer practice last night. So here I am in our classroom this morning doing chapter 6. So if you'll read along with me on page 57, I'd appreciate it. Here we go, chapter 6. The next day at school, George couldn't stop thinking about the wonders he had seen at Eric's house. Enormous clouds in outer space and flying rocks, Cosmos, the world's most powerful computer, and they all live next door to him, George, the boy whose parents wouldn't even let him have an ordinary computer in the house. The excitement was almost too much to bear, especially now that George was sitting once more at his very boring desk in the classroom. He doodled on the school book in front of him with his colored pencils, trying to sketch Eric's amazing computer, the one that could make a window from thin air and through that window show you the birth and death of a star. But even though George could see it perfectly in his mind, his hand found it difficult to draw a picture that looked anything like what he had seen. It was very annoying. He had to keep crossing parts out and drawing them again until the whole page looked like one giant squiggle. "Ow!" he exclaimed suddenly as a missile made of a scrunched-up ball of paper hit him in the back of the head. "Ah, George," said Dr. Reaper, his teacher. "So you are with us this afternoon, after all." "How nice." George looked up with a start. Dr. Reaper was standing right over him, staring down through his really smeared glasses. There was a large blue ink stain on his jacket, which reminded George of the shape of an exploding star. "Do you have anything to say to the class?" said Dr. Reaper, peering down at George's notebook, which George hastily tried to cover. "Other than, ow, the only word I've heard you say today?" "No, not really," said George in a strangled, high-pitched voice. "You wouldn't like to say, 'Dear Dr. Reaper, here is the homework I spent all weekend slaving over'?" Well," said George, embarrassed. Or, "Dr. Reaper, I've listened carefully to every word you've ever said in class, written them all down, added my own comments, and here is my project with which you will be extremely pleased." Muttered George, wondering how to get out of this one. "And of course you wouldn't," said Dr. Reaper heavily. "After all, I'm just the teacher, and I stand here all day saying things for my own amusement and fun with no hope that anyone will ever gain anything of value from my attempts to educate them." "I do listen," protested George, who was now feeling guilty. "Don't try to flatter me," said Dr. Reaper rather wildly. "It won't work." He whipped around sharply. "And give me that." He shot across the classroom so fast he was almost a blur of speed and snatched a cell phone from a boy sitting at the back. Dr. Reaper might wear tweed jackets and speak like a man from a century ago, but his pupils were so scared of him. In this case, pupils means students. They never tricked him in the way that teachers did who were foolish enough to try and befriend them. He was a new teacher, and he hadn't been at the school very long. But even on his first day, he had quelled a whole room full of students into silence just by staring at them. There was nothing modern or touchy-feely or cozy about Dr. Reaper, with the result that his classrooms were always orderly, his homework came in on time, and even the slouchy rebel boys sat up straight and fell quiet when he walked into the room. The kids called him Greeper. A nickname came from the sign on his office door, which read Dr. G. Reaper, or Greeper the Creeper, because of his mysterious habit of appearing without warning in far-flung corners of the school. There would be a gentle swoosh of thick-soled shoes and a faint smell of old tobacco, and before anyone knew it, Greeper would be bearing down on whatever secret mischief was brewing, rubbing his scarred hands with delight. No one knew how he managed to cover both hands in red, scaly, painful-looking burn marks, and no one would ever dare ask. "Perhaps, George," said Greeper, pocketing the cell phone he had just confiscated, "you would care to enlighten the class as to the artwork you have been working on this morning represents." It's, whispered George, feeling his ears become hot and pink. "Speak up, boy, speak up," ordered Greeper. We're all curious to know quite what this, he held up George's drawing of Cosmos so the whole class could see, is meant to be. Aren't we, class? The other children snickered, delighted that Grieper was picking on someone who wasn't them. At that moment, George really hated Grieper. He hated him so much he completely forgot his fear of shame or humiliation in front of other pupils. Unfortunately, he had also forgot his promise to Eric. "It's a very special computer, actually," he said in a loud voice, "which can show you what's happening in the universe. It belongs to my friend Eric." He fixed Grieper with a very blue stare, his eyes determined under his tufts of dark red hair. "There are amazing things in outer space just flying around all the time, like planets and stars and gold and stuff." George was making that last part up. Eric hadn't said anything about gold in outer space. For the first time since George had been in Grieper's class, his teacher seemed lost for words. He just stood there, holding George's book in his hand, his jaw falling open as he looked at George in wonder. "So it does work after all," he half whispered to George. "And you've seen it? That's amazing." A moment later, it seemed as though Grieper were waking from a dream. He snapped George's book shut, handed it back to him, and walked to the front of the class. "Now," said Grieper loudly, "given today's behavior, I'm going to assign 100 lines. I want you to write neatly and clearly in your books. I will not send text messages in Dr. Reaper's class because I am too busy listening to all the interesting things he has to say. 100 times, please, and anyone who hasn't finished by the time the bell rings can stay behind." "Very good, get on with it." There was an angry muttering from the classroom. George's classmates had been looking forward to seeing him being taken to pieces by the teacher, and instead, they'd all gotten punished for something quite different, and George had mostly been left off the hook. "But, sir, that's not fair," whined a boy in the back. "Neither is life," said Grieper happily. "And that is one of the most useful lessons I could possibly teach you. I feel proud that you've understood it already. Carry on, class." With that, he sat down at his desk, got out a book that was full of complicated equations, and started flickering through the pages, nodding to himself wisely as he did so. George felt a ruler being jabbed into his back. "This is all your fault," hissed Ringo, the class bully who was sitting behind him. "Silence!" thundered Grieper without even looking up from his book. "Anyone who speaks will do 200 lines instead." His hand whizzing across the page, George finished the 100 lines in his neat writing just as the bell rang for the end of class. Carefully, he tore out the page with the picture of Cosmos on it and folded it up, tucking it into his back pants pocket before dropping his book on Grieper's desk. But George hadn't taken even 2 steps down the hall before Grieper caught up with him and barred his way. "George," said Grieper very seriously, "this computer is real, isn't it? You've seen it, haven't you?" The look in his eyes was frightening. "I was just, making it up," said George quickly, trying to wiggle away. He wished he hadn't said anything to Grieper at all. At all to Grieper. "Where is it, George?" asked the teacher, speaking slowly and quietly. "It's very important that you tell me where this amazing computer lives." "There is no computer," said George, managing to duck under Grieper's arm. "It doesn't exist. I just imagined it, that's all." Grieper drew back and looked at George thoughtfully. "Be careful, George," he said in a scarily quiet voice. "Be very careful." With that, he walked away. Oh my goodness, I wonder what Dr. Grieper has to do with all this. All right, we'll find out more next week with Chapter 7. Bye, guys.